Marcus Chun pressed his face against the cold metal bars of the detention cell, watching the alien guards walk away down the corridor. Their chittering laughter echoed off the walls as they disappeared around the corner, leaving him alone with his punishment. Well, not entirely alone. In the far corner of the cell, something moved in the shadows. Marcus had caught glimpses of it during the past hour since they'd thrown him in here, but every time he tried to get a better look, whatever it was retreated deeper into the darkness. The punishment was supposed to be simple. 3 days in solitary confinement for refusing to hand over the human navigation codes to the Zephyrian Empire. 3 days of silence and isolation to make him reconsider his loyalty to Earth. But the guards had laughed too much when they shoved him into this particular cell. They'd said something in their clicking language about the Mad One and entertainment. Marcus was starting to understand why. A low growl came from the corner, followed by the scraping of claws against metal. Whatever was in here with him wasn't friendly, and the Zephyrians had probably put him here hoping it would tear him apart or drive him insane. "Hey," Marcus called out softly, trying to keep his voice calm. "I know you're there. I'm not going to hurt you." The growling stopped. For a moment, the cell was completely silent except for the distant hum of the ship's engines. Then he heard something that made his blood run cold. The sound of labored breathing, almost human, but not quite. Marcus slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a small energy stick, one of the few personal items the guards had missed during his capture. The pale blue light illuminated the cell, and what he saw made him freeze. Huddled in the corner was a figure that might have once been a young woman, but now looked more animal than person. Her hair was long and tangled, hanging like a curtain over her face. Her clothes were torn rags, and her fingernails had grown into claw-like points. Pale blue skin marked her as Zephyrian, but there was something wrong with her eyes when she looked up at him. They were wild, unfocused, filled with a mixture of fear and rage. She hissed at the light and scrambled further back against the wall, but there was nowhere left to go. "Easy," Marcus said, keeping the light dim. "I'm not one of them. I'm human." The girl tilted her head at the word human, and for just a moment, her expression changed. The wildness in her eyes flickered, replaced by something that might have been curiosity. Marcus had heard stories about what the Zephyrian Empire did to prisoners who wouldn't cooperate. They had ways of breaking minds that were more effective than simple torture. This girl had probably been here for months, maybe years, slowly losing her sanity in this metal box. "My name is Marcus," he said, sitting down slowly on the floor to make himself less threatening. "What's yours?" She didn't answer, just stared at him with those strange, shifting eyes. But she didn't retreat any further either. Over the next several hours, Marcus tried different approaches. He offered her some of the stale bread the guards had given him, but she knocked it away with a snarl. He tried speaking to her in the few words of Zephyrian he knew, but that only seemed to make her more agitated. Eventually, he just sat quietly, letting her get used to his presence. As the ship's artificial night cycle began, the lights in the corridor dimmed. The girl seemed to relax slightly in the darkness, moving closer to the center of the cell, but still keeping her distance from Marcus. That's when he heard it, a soft humming sound, barely audible. It took him a moment to realize it was coming from the girl. The melody was strange, alien, but there was something hauntingly beautiful about it. It reminded him of lullabies his mother used to sing when he was young, though the tune was completely different. "That's beautiful," Marcus said quietly when she paused. The girl's head snapped toward him, and the humming stopped. For a moment, he thought he'd ruined whatever small progress he'd made. But then, very softly, she began to hum again. Marcus closed his eyes and listened. Tomorrow, the Zephyrian interrogators would probably come for him again, demanding the navigation codes that could lead their fleet straight to Earth. They'd use pain, drugs, maybe even neural probes to try to break him. But for now, in this dark cell with this broken alien girl, he found an unexpected peace. He didn't know that this moment would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire war between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire. He didn't know that the girl humming in the darkness held secrets that could shift the balance of power across the galaxy. All he knew was that she was alone and scared, and for some reason, her strange song reminded him of home. As sleep finally took him, Marcus made a decision that would have consequences he couldn't imagine. Whatever happened next, he wasn't going to leave this girl behind when he escaped. Because he would escape, humans always found a way, and sometimes the way chose them. Marcus woke to find the alien girl sitting just 3 feet away from him, staring at his face with intense curiosity. In the dim light filtering through the cell bars, he could see her features more clearly. Despite the wild hair and the dirt, she looked young, maybe in her early 20s by human standards. Her blue skin had an almost ethereal quality, and her large eyes were a shade of purple he'd never seen before. When she saw him wake up, she didn't retreat. Instead, she tilted her head like a curious bird. "Good morning," Marcus said softly, sitting up slowly so he wouldn't startle her. She made a sound that might have been an attempt at copying his words, but it came out as a series of clicks and whistles mixed with something that sounded almost like mourning. Marcus felt a spark of excitement. She was trying to communicate. That meant there was still a mind behind those wild eyes, still a person trapped inside whatever the Zephyrians had done to her. "Marcus," he said, pointing to himself. "Marcus." She stared at him for a long moment, then made another sound. "Marcus." "Close." Marcus smiled. "Marcus. And you? What's your name?" The girl's expression suddenly changed. The curiosity vanished, replaced by fear and anger. She scrambled back against the wall, making distressed clicking sounds. Marcus realized his mistake. Asking for her name might have triggered memories of whatever torture the Zephyrians had put her through. Many of their interrogation techniques involve stripping away personal identity. "It's okay," he said quickly. "You don't have to tell me. We can figure that out later." The next few hours established a pattern. The girl would approach him cautiously, drawn by curiosity, but any mention of her past or attempts to get too personal would send her retreating. Marcus learned to be patient, to let her set the pace. When the guards brought his daily meal, a bowl of gray protein paste and more stale bread, the girl watched with hungry eyes but didn't approach. Marcus noticed she was much thinner than she should be. "When do they feed you?" he asked. She just stared at him. Marcus divided his portion in half and slid one part across the floor toward her. She looked at the food, then at him, then back at the food. Slowly, she crept forward and grabbed the bowl, retreating quickly to her corner. As she ate, Marcus noticed something important. Despite her feral behavior, she still used her hands like a person, not an animal. She was careful not to spill, and she ate slowly, savoring each bite. This wasn't someone who had completely lost their humanity or whatever the Zephyrian equivalent was. "You remember being civilized," Marcus said thoughtfully. "You're just hiding from it." The girl paused in her eating and looked at him. For just a moment, her expression was completely lucid, almost analytical. Then the wildness returned, and she went back to her food. That afternoon, the guards came for Marcus. 2 large Zephyrians in military uniforms unlocked the cell and gestured for him to follow. As they led him away, Marcus looked back to see the girl pressed against the bars, watching him go with what looked like panic in her eyes. The interrogation room was exactly what Marcus expected: bright lights, a metal chair with restraints, and walls lined with devices he didn't want to think about. Commander Zereth, the Zephyrian officer in charge of his case, waited with several technicians. Human Marcus Chun. Zereth's translator device gave his words a mechanical quality. "Have you reconsidered our generous offer?" "Still not interested in helping you find Earth," Marcus replied. "Pity. I had hoped your night with Subject 247 would have made you more cooperative." "Subject 247. That's what they called her. What did you do to her?" Marcus asked. Zereth's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was Zephyrian laughter. Subject 247 was a gifted young scientist before she became uncooperative. Dr. Kira then, one of our finest xenobiologists. She made the mistake of questioning our methods during the human research project. Marcus felt a chill. The Human Research Project was something Earth's intelligence networks had heard rumors about. Zephyrian experiments on captured human prisoners. She tried to help your species, Zereth continued. Argued that humans were too valuable to waste on standard interrogation techniques. Said her neural patterns were unique, worth studying rather than destroying. So we let her study them. And she became attached to her subjects. Started sabotaging our work, helping humans escape. Very disappointing behavior from such a promising scientist. Zereth moved closer, so we gave her a choice. Submit to neural restructuring to correct her defective thinking, or experience the same fate as the humans she tried to protect. She chose the humans. Indeed, we subjected her to the same isolation and sensory deprivation protocols we use on your species. The process was quite successful. As you can see, she is no longer capable of coherent resistance. Though I admit, the results were more dramatic than with human subjects. Marcus clenched his fists. The girl, Kira, had been tortured into madness for trying to help his people. Now, then, Zereth activated one of the neural probe devices. Shall we begin your session? Or would you prefer to return to Subject 247? I'm curious to see how long you can maintain your sanity in her company. The next hour was agony. The neural probe felt like someone driving hot spikes through Marcus's skull, while simultaneously filling his mind with chaotic noise. But human military training included resistance techniques, and Marcus had always been stubborn. He gave him nothing. When they finally dragged him back to the cell, barely conscious, Kira was waiting. As soon as the guards left, she approached him cautiously. Marcus was surprised to feel gentle hands checking his injuries, hear soft clicking sounds that sounded almost like concern. "I'm okay," he mumbled through his pain. Kira sat beside him as he recovered, occasionally making those soft sounds. When Marcus finally felt strong enough to sit up, he found her watching him with an expression he hadn't seen before, one that looked almost protective. "Kira," he said softly. She flinched at the name, but didn't retreat. "That was your name, wasn't it?" Dr. Kiratan. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. The wildness was fighting to return to her eyes. "You were a scientist," Marcus continued gently. "You tried to help humans. You sacrificed everything to protect people like me." Kira made a distressed sound and clutched her head with both hands. "I know you're still in there," Marcus said, "and I know you're scared. But I want you to know something, what you did mattered. Those humans you saved, they made it home. They warned Earth about what was coming." Slowly, Kira's hands came away from her head. When she looked at him, her eyes were completely lucid. "They made it home?" Her voice was raspy from disuse, but clearly intelligent. Marcus nodded. "Because of you." For the first time since he'd arrived, Kira smiled. It transformed her entire face, revealing the brilliant scientist she had once been. "Then, it was worth it," she whispered. That night, as they shared Marcus's evening meal, Kira began to tell him about the research she'd done, the humans she'd helped escape, and, most importantly, the hidden databanks she created before her capture. Information that could change the course of the war. Marcus realized that his punishment had become something else entirely. He hadn't just found an ally, he'd found hope. And tomorrow, they were going to start planning their escape. Kira's transformation over the next 2 days was remarkable. Once she began speaking again, her scientific mind emerged like a flower blooming after a long winter. She still had moments where the trauma overwhelmed her, but Marcus learned to recognize the signs and help ground her back to reality. "The ship's detention level has 17 cells," Kira whispered as they huddled together in their corner, sharing body heat in the artificially cold environment. "Most are empty now, but there are 3 other prisoners, 2 Zephyrian political dissidents, and a human pilot named Sarah Rodriguez." Marcus felt his heart skip. "Sarah Rodriguez?" "Short, dark hair, scar on her left cheek." "You know her? She's from my squadron. I thought she was dead." Marcus clenched his fists. "How long has she been here?" 6 months. They've been using her for the neural mapping experiments." Kira's voice dropped. "Marcus, what they're doing to her. We need to get her out soon, or there won't be anything left to save." That night, Kira revealed the true scope of what she knew. During her time as a researcher, she discovered that the Zephyrian Empire's war strategy depended on a massive fleet hidden in the Kepler 442 system. But, more importantly, she found the location of their central AI command hub, a space station that controlled their entire military network. If we could get this information to Earth, she said, sketching diagrams in the dust on the cell floor, your people could end this war in a single coordinated strike. Could get. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You mean we'll get? We're getting out of here, Kira. She looked at him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Marcus, this is a military vessel with over 3,000 crew members. The detention level is in the most secure section of the ship. Even if we somehow escaped our cell, we'd never make it to the shuttle bays. You're thinking like a scientist, Marcus grinned. I'm thinking like a human. Over the next day, Marcus shared his plan. It was audacious, dangerous, and relied heavily on Kira's knowledge of the ship's systems and his own experience with guerrilla tactics. The key is creating chaos, he explained. Humans have a saying, when in doubt, blow something up. The Zephyrians are methodical, orderly. They don't handle unexpected situations well. Kira noted the Hotsfully. The power distribution center is 3 levels above us. If we could overload the main conduits. Exactly. And while they're dealing with cascading system failures, we grab Sarah and the other prisoners and head for the escape pods. What about the data? The location of their fleet and command station? Marcus pointed to Kira's temple. It's all up there, isn't it? You memorized everything before they caught you. Yes, but Marcus, even if we escape, even if we somehow make it back to human space, who's going to believe a story about a feral alien girl having crucial war intelligence? Marcus took her hands in his. They'll believe me. And, more importantly, you're not feral anymore. You're Dr. Kira then, xenobiologist, and the bravest person I've ever met. That evening, they put their plan into motion. Kira had noticed that the guard rotation changed every 8 hours, and there was always a 3-minute window when the corridor was empty. During the next shift change, Marcus created a distraction by pretending to have a seizure from his neural probe injuries. When the guard rushed in to check on him, Kira struck. Her time in captivity had taught her to move silently, and her scientific knowledge told her exactly where to hit to render someone unconscious without killing them. The guard dropped without a sound. I can't believe that worked, Marcus whispered as they dragged the unconscious Zephyrian into their cell. Humans aren't the only ones capable of adaptation, Kira replied, stripping off the guard's access codes and weapon. The corridors of the ship were dimly lit during the night cycle, casting long shadows that helped conceal their movement. Kira led them through a maze of service tunnels she'd mapped during her time as a researcher. They moved slowly, carefully, stopping frequently to listen for patrols. Finding the other prisoners was easier than expected. Sarah Rodriguez was in a cell just 2 levels down, though what they found horrified both of them. The human pilot was barely conscious, connected to neural monitoring equipment that pulsed with ugly red light. Sarah, Marcus whispered urgently. Sarah, it's Marcus Chun. We're getting you out. Sarah's eyes focused slowly. Marcus? This has to be another hallucination. The machines, they show me things. Not a hallucination. Real rescue. Marcus began disconnecting the neural equipment while Kira worked on the cell locks. Can you walk? I think so. The 2 Zephyrian political prisoners were in better condition, though one was injured. They quickly explained the situation and found that both aliens were eager to help. One of them, a former military engineer named Dex, knew the ship's layout even better than Kira. The power distribution center is heavily guarded, Dex warned. At least 6 armed soldiers at all times. Then, we make them come to us, Marcus said. Kira, remember what you told me about the atmospheric recycling system? Kira's eyes lit up with understanding. If we introduce methane into the air circulation, the whole ship becomes a potential bomb. They'll have to evacuate non-essential sections to prevent an explosion. 20 minutes later, alarms began blaring throughout the vessel. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in red as automated systems detected dangerous gas levels and began emergency protocols. Most of the crew was evacuated to safe areas while emergency teams rushed to contain the leak. In the chaos, Marcus and his group made their way to the shuttle bay. They encountered only 3 guards, and the element of surprise worked in their favor. Dex proved surprisingly effective in combat, while Kira's knowledge of Zephyrian anatomy made her strikes devastatingly precise. There, Kira pointed to a small scout ship. That one has long-range capability and stealth systems. As they prepared for launch, Sarah suddenly gripped Marcus's arm. Wait, there's something else. The neural experiments. I saw things in their computers. They're not just studying humans for interrogation. What do you mean? They're developing biological weapons. Viruses specifically designed to target human genetics. The test data is in the ship's central computer core. Marcus looked at Kira. Can we get it? Not without going through the most heavily defended part of the ship, she replied. But what? Kira's expression grew determined. I can trigger a core data dump to the scout ship. It'll take a few minutes, and it'll definitely alert them to what we're doing, but we get everything. Biological weapons data, fleet positions, command codes. Do it. As their stolen scout ship prepared for launch, Kira worked frantically at the computer interface. Outside, they could see Zephyrian security forces finally realizing what was happening and rushing toward the shuttle bay. 30 seconds, Kira called out. The bay doors began opening as Marcus fired up the engines. Energy blasts from Zephyrian weapons splashed against the ship's hull. 20 seconds. More security forces poured into the bay. Several of them had heavy weapons that could punch through the scout ship's armor. 10 seconds. Kira, we need to go now. 5, 4, 3, got it. The scout ship shot out of the bay like a bullet, racing away from the massive Zephyrian vessel. Behind them, the enemy ship began pursuing, but the little scout was faster and more maneuverable. As they entered hyperspace, heading for the nearest human outpost, Marcus looked back at Kira. She was smiling despite the exhaustion and stress. We did it, she said softly. We actually did it. This is just the beginning, Marcus replied. Now we have to convince Earth's military to trust intelligence from a Zephyrian scientist. They'll trust it, Sarah said from her recovery bunk. Because it's not just intelligence. It's proof that not all aliens are enemies. Some of them are willing to sacrifice everything to do what's right. Marcus nodded, thinking about how much had changed since he'd been thrown into that cell with what he thought was a feral alien girl. Sometimes the best things in life came from the worst circumstances. And sometimes hope came from the most unexpected places. The human outpost at Proxima Station was a fortress of metal and energy shields floating in the void between stars. As their stolen scout ship approached, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. They'd made it to safety, but now came the hard part, convincing Earth's military command that the intelligence they'd gathered was legitimate. Unknown vessel, this is Proxima Control, came the transmission. Identify yourself and state your business. This is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chun, serial number 4477 Delta 9. Marcus responded. I'm traveling with rescued personnel and carrying urgent intelligence regarding enemy fleet movements. There was a long pause. Marcus Chun, you've been listed as missing in action for 6 days. Maintain current course and prepare for escort to docking base 7. 3 human fighters appeared alongside their ship, guiding them to the station. As they docked, Marcus could see security teams waiting for them. Standard procedure for any vessel coming from enemy space. Remember, Marcus said to Kira as they prepared to disembark. Let me do the talking initially. Military types can be suspicious of outsiders. Kira nodded nervously. She'd cleaned herself up as much as possible during the journey, but she was still obviously Zephyrian, and Earth forces had been fighting the Zephyrian Empire for 3 years now. The reception committee was led by Admiral Rebecca Torres, a no-nonsense veteran Marcus recognized from intelligence briefings. Her expression was carefully neutral as she watched them exit the ship. Commander Chun, she said, glad to see you alive. We need a full debrief immediately. Yes, ma'am. But first, this is Dr. Kira then. She's a Zephyrian scientist who helped us escape and has crucial intelligence about enemy operations. The security teams immediately raised their weapons, and Marcus stepped protectively in front of Kira. "Stand down," Admiral Torres barked. "Doctor, then, is it? You're quite far from home." "Admiral," Kira said, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. "I have information about a Zephyrian biological weapons program targeting human genetics, as well as the location of their hidden fleet and command structure." Torres studied her carefully. "And why would you share this information with us?" "Because what my people are doing is wrong. The experiments, the torture, the plan to exterminate humanity. I can't be part of it anymore." The next several hours were intense. Marcus, Sarah, and the two Zephyrian dissidents were debriefed separately while Kira underwent extensive questioning. The data she'd downloaded from the ship was analyzed by Earth's best cryptographers and intelligence experts. Marcus found himself in a sterile conference room with Admiral Torres and several other high-ranking officers, explaining how he'd gone from prisoner to escapee. "So you're telling me," said General Harrison, Earth's chief military strategist, "that this alien scientist voluntarily gave up everything to help humans she'd never met?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you. Kira sacrificed her career, her freedom, and nearly her sanity to protect human prisoners. She's the reason Sarah Rodriguez is still alive. Even if we believe her motivations are genuine," Admiral Torres interjected, "how do we know the intelligence is accurate? This could be an elaborate deception." Before Marcus could answer, Lieutenant Colonel Parks burst into the room. "Admiral, you need to see this. Our cryptography team has verified the biological weapons data. It's real, and it's terrifying." The room fell silent as Parks activated the holographic display. Images of laboratory notes, test results, and viral prototypes filled the air around them. "According to this data," Parks continued, "the Zephyrians have developed 3 different bioweapons specifically engineered to target human DNA. They're planning to deploy them within the next 2 months. Can they be countered?" Admiral Torres asked. "Possibly, but only because we now know what we're looking for. Without this intelligence, the first attack would have been devastating." General Harrison leaned forward. "What about the fleet positions and command structure information?" "Also verified. We've cross-referenced the data with our own intelligence, and it matches perfectly. The hidden fleet in the Kepler 442 system is real, and it's massive, over 400 warships." Marcus felt vindicated but also worried. "What about Doctor then? Is she being treated well?" Admiral Torres exchanged glances with the other officers. "Commander Chun, I understand you feel gratitude toward this alien, but we need to be practical. She's provided valuable intelligence, but she's still a member of an enemy species. She's a refugee," Marcus said firmly. "And, more than that, she's proven herself to be an ally. Without her help, none of us would have escaped. Be that as it may, she'll remain in protective custody for the foreseeable future." Marcus stood up. "Admiral, with respect, that's a mistake. Dr. Then's knowledge of Zephyrian science and culture could be invaluable in developing countermeasures to their bioweapons. Keeping her locked up is like throwing away our best resource. And having her work alongside our scientists poses significant security risks. Then, assign me as her liaison," Marcus said impulsively. "I'll vouch for her behavior and ensure security protocols are followed." General Harrison raised an eyebrow. "You're volunteering to babysit an enemy alien?" "I'm volunteering to work with a brilliant scientist who's already saved thousands of human lives." Later that day, Marcus was allowed to visit Kira in her detention quarters. They were comfortable enough, more like a hotel room than a prison cell, but he could see the stress and uncertainty in her expression. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Better than I expected," she replied. "Your people have been professional, if not exactly friendly. I understand their caution. The intelligence you provided checked out. The bioweapons program is real." Kira's expression darkened. "I hope I was wrong about that." "Marcus, there's something else. Something I didn't mention in the debriefing because I wasn't sure I should." "What is it?" "The bioweapons aren't the Empire's final plan. They're just the opening move. There's a larger strategy, something called Project Extinction. I only caught fragments of information, but I believe they're planning to use the bioweapons to weaken human defenses before launching a final assault on Earth itself. Marcus felt cold. How long do we have? Based on what I overheard, perhaps 6 months. Maybe less if the bioweapon tests go better than expected. That evening, Marcus requested another meeting with Admiral Torres. This time, he brought evidence of his own, personnel records, combat reports, and testimonials from other officers who'd worked with him. Admiral, I've served with distinction for 8 years. I've led successful missions behind enemy lines and brought back valuable intelligence before. I'm asking you to trust my judgment about Dr. Then. This is different, Commander. You're asking me to integrate an enemy alien into our most sensitive research programs. I'm asking you to work with someone who's already proven her value. The bioweapons data alone has probably saved millions of lives. Admiral Torres was quiet for a long moment. All right, Commander. I'm authorizing a trial period. Dr. Then will be assigned to work with our biodefense team, with you as her official liaison and security monitor. But understand this. Any sign of deception, any indication that she's feeding us false information or compromising our security, and both of you will face court-martial. Understood, Mom? And, Commander? This arrangement is highly irregular. You're putting your entire career on the line for this alien. Marcus nodded. I know, ma'am. But sometimes doing the right thing requires taking risks. 3 days later, Marcus watched as Kira was introduced to Earth's top biodefense scientists. Her excitement at being able to practice science again was infectious, and within hours, she was deep in discussions about viral countermeasures and genetic therapies. Dr. Elizabeth Warner, the head of the biodefense program, pulled Marcus aside during a break. Commander, I have to admit, Dr. Then's insights are remarkable. She's identified 3 potential vulnerabilities in the Zephyrian bioweapons that we would never have found on our own. She's brilliant, Marcus agreed. But there's something else. Her approach to the science is different from what I'd expect from an enemy weapons designer. She seems more interested in protecting life than destroying it. That's because she is. Her original research was about understanding and preserving different forms of life, not weaponizing them. Dr. Warner nodded thoughtfully. Commander, I think you should know, several of my team members have volunteered to work overtime on this project. Dr. Then's passion for the work is inspiring them to push harder than they ever have before. That night, as Marcus and Kira reviewed the day's progress in her quarters, she seemed more like her old self than ever. Marcus, I want to thank you for taking such a risk for me. I know what you've put on the line. You don't need to thank me. You've already proven yourself a dozen times over. Still, I know this isn't easy for your people. Trusting an alien, especially one whose species has caused so much pain. Marcus looked at her seriously. Kira, you need to understand something. You're not just an alien anymore. You're part of the team. You're one of us. She smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it reached her eyes completely. Then, let's make sure we save both our peoples, she said. Outside the station, space remained dark and cold, but inside, hope was beginning to burn brighter than it had in years. 6 weeks later, the war changed forever. Marcus stood in the command center of the newly constructed Earth Defense Station, watching as reports flooded in from across human space. The bioweapon countermeasures developed by Kira and Dr. Warner's team had worked beyond their wildest expectations. When the Zephyrian Empire launched their biological attack, expecting to find defenseless human colonies, they instead found populations that were not only immune to their weapons, but had turned those same weapons against the Empire's own forces. Incredible, Admiral Torres said, reviewing the tactical displays. The Kepler 442 fleet is in full retreat. Reports suggest they've lost over 60% of their ships. The bioweapons backfired, Dr. Warner explained. Dr. Then's modifications not only protected our people, but created a viral agent that specifically targets Zephyrian respiratory systems. Their own attack vector became their weakness. Marcus looked across the room to where Kira was working at a science station, coordinating with research teams across the galaxy. In 6 weeks, she'd become the most valuable intelligence asset Earth had ever acquired. More than that, she'd become something he'd never expected: family. Commander Chun, Admiral Torres approached him. You should know that the Earth Council has made a decision about Dr. Then's status. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. What kind of decision? She's being granted full citizenship and a permanent position as Director of Xenobiological Defense. The paperwork was signed this morning. Relief flooded through Marcus. Thank you, Admiral. That means everything. Don't thank me. Thank the 3 billion people across human space who are alive because of her work. Torres paused. There's something else. The Council is forming a new unit, the Interspecies Cooperation Division. They want you to head it up. Mom. Other Zephyrian scientists have been reaching out through secret channels, offering to defect. Apparently, word has spread about Dr. Then's success here. They want the same opportunity to help end this war. Marcus felt a surge of excitement. How many are we talking about? At least 40, possibly more. Scientists, engineers, even some military officers who are disillusioned with the Empire's methods. Torres smiled slightly. It seems your feral alien girl has started a revolution. That evening, Marcus and Kira stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The view was peaceful, but both knew that the war was far from over. I received a message today, Kira said quietly, from my former research partner, Dr. Valex. He's on the Zephyrian homeworld. What did he say? He wants to help. He said that what we've accomplished here has inspired others. Scientists, civilians, even some government officials are starting to question the Empire's goals. She turned to Marcus. He thinks there might be a path to peace. Marcus considered this. What would that look like? A new government, one that values cooperation over conquest. But it would require removing the current military leadership, and that won't be easy. Maybe not, Marcus said. But humans have a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. We've shown that we can defend ourselves. Now we need to show that we can also forgive. 3 months later, the first Zephyrian defectors arrived at Earth Defense Station. Marcus watched as Kira greeted them, tears streaming down her face as she embraced colleagues she hadn't seen in over a year. The group included 12 scientists, 3 engineers, and, remarkably, a former Zephyrian admiral named Korath who brought detailed intelligence about the Empire's remaining fleet capabilities. Dr. Then, Admiral Korath said during the welcoming ceremony, what you've done here has given hope to millions of my people. The Empire's bioweapon failure has exposed the corruption and incompetence of our leadership. Entire sectors are demanding change. What we've done, Kira corrected. This success belongs to all of us, human and Zephyrian alike. Over the following months, the Interspecies Cooperation Division grew rapidly. Marcus found himself managing teams that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Humans and Zephyrians working side by side on everything from weapons development to medical research to cultural exchange programs. The war gradually shifted from open conflict to something more resembling a civil war within the Zephyrian Empire itself. Reformist factions, supported by intelligence and resources from Earth, began challenging the military government's authority. The irony is beautiful, Dr. Warner observed during one of their weekly briefings. They tried to destroy us with biological weapons, and instead we've given them a biological revolution. The defector scientists are spreading our collaborative research methods throughout their society. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus, Kira burst into his office one morning, carrying a data pad with barely contained excitement. Dr. Valex has made contact with Empress Sylvana herself. Marcus looked up from his reports. The Empress? But she's been silent throughout the war. She was being kept isolated by the military leadership. But the recent uprising has given her opportunities to reassert her authority. And, Marcus, she wants to meet with us. Us specifically, you, me, and Admiral Torres. She's proposing a formal peace negotiation with the understanding that any agreement would include full integration of our scientific collaboration programs. The meeting took place 3 weeks later on a neutral space station in the Vega system. Marcus had expected the Zephyrian Empress to be intimidating, but Sylvana was surprisingly young and clearly exhausted from months of political struggle. "Commander Chun," she said through her translator, "Dr. Then has told me much about you. It seems that what began as punishment has become salvation for both our species." "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, "I think we've learned that cooperation achieves more than conquest. Indeed, I have a proposal for you. The Empire's military leadership has been removed from power. The new government wishes to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth, with Dr. Then serving as our primary ambassador." Admiral Torres leaned forward. "And in return, full access to our scientific databases, joint research initiatives, and, most importantly, reparations for the damage our war has caused. We have much to atone for." Over the next several hours, they worked out the framework for what would become known as the Vega Accords, the first formal peace treaty between human and alien civilizations. 6 months after that, Marcus stood in the same detention cell where he'd first met Kira. The ship had been converted into a museum, and this particular cell had become a symbol of how dramatically things could change. "Strange to think it all started here," Kira said, joining him in the small space. "Are you ever sorry?" Marcus asked. "About everything you gave up, everything you lost?" Kira considered the question seriously. "I lost my old life, my comfortable position, my certainty about who I was and what I believed. But I gained something much more valuable." "What's that?" "Purpose. The chance to be part of something bigger than myself. And," she smiled, "a friend who was willing to risk everything for someone he barely knew." Marcus nodded, thinking about how much both their lives had changed. "The new joint research station is almost finished. Are you ready to be the director of the first truly interspecies scientific facility? Only if you're ready to be its head of security. I wouldn't miss it." As they left the cell and walked through the museum, Marcus reflected on the strange turns life could take. He'd entered that cell as a prisoner facing interrogation and torture. He was leaving it as a symbol of hope for two civilizations that had once been enemies. Sometimes the most important moments in history started with the simplest human gesture, reaching out to someone who was alone and afraid and choosing to help instead of looking away. The war was over. The real work of building peace was just beginning. And it had all started with a punishment that became a gift in a dark cell where a broken alien girl had hummed a lullaby that sounded like home. 3 years later, as Marcus watched human and Zephyrian children playing together in the gardens of New Harmony Station, he knew that some stories don't end. They just become the beginning of something better. Kira found him there, as she often did, watching the future they'd helped create. "Any regrets?" she asked, echoing his question from years before. Marcus smiled, listening to the laughter of children who would never know a universe where their species were enemies. Not a single one. The stars watched over them all, human and Zephyrian alike, as they wrote the next chapter of galactic history together.